We've all felt it at some point in our lives, an underlying sense that something about us is fundamentally wrong, broken even, a quiet, persistent thought that no matter how much we try, we're just not quite good enough. Maybe it's in the way we feel disconnected from others, or how our inner worlds seem at odds with the expectations of society. For some, this feeling lingers beneath the surface, influencing every action, every decision. For others, it becomes the defining narrative of their existence. In a world obsessed with perfection, it's easy to believe the lie that being broken is a personal flaw, something that needs to be fixed, a problem to be solved. We've been conditioned to think that there's something wrong with us when we don't fit neatly into the boxes society has created, when we struggle with mental health, when our thoughts spiral into the dark recesses of doubt, when we can't measure up to the ideals we see in the media. These are the moments we feel most broken. But what if that feeling isn't a sign of failure? What if it's a sign of something much deeper, something that could lead to growth, understanding, and ultimately, transformation? Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, would tell you that the sensation of being broken is, in fact, a profound misunderstanding of our own unconscious mind. He believed that the struggle we feel, the parts of ourselves we think are fractured, are actually our psyche's attempt to integrate all its facets, dark and light, strength and weakness, wisdom and ignorance. Jung's ideas challenge the very notion of brokenness. According to him, what we call broken is simply the result of ignoring the deeper, unconscious forces at play within us. It's a product of our inability to understand the complexity of who we truly are. You see, in today's world, we've become obsessed with the idea of fixing ourselves. We constantly look for ways to improve our minds, bodies, and souls, as if there's some perfect state we must reach in order to be happy, to be whole. But this drive for perfection, for seamless unity of the self, has a dark underbelly. It leads to a culture of self-doubt, anxiety, and even self-loathing. We have created an environment where imperfection is not just unacceptable, it's a failure. It is within this context that we begin to question, what does it truly mean to be whole? And how can we reconcile the brokenness we feel with the idea of inner completeness? The truth is, the feeling of being broken doesn't come from a lack of something. It arises from the lack of understanding, from the absence of connection with the deeper layers of our own psyche. We are all born into a world that demands conformity, and in the process, we begin to abandon parts of ourselves that do not fit the mold. Over time, this disconnection becomes the very thing we perceive as brokenness. But what if that perception is wrong? What if the parts of ourselves we've abandoned are not broken at all, but merely misunderstood? Jung's work invites us to reconsider the very idea of being broken. In his view, suffering is not a sign of failure. It is, instead, a crucial part of the journey towards self-understanding. We do not need to be fixed. We need to learn how to listen to the parts of ourselves we've ignored, to understand the unconscious forces shaping our thoughts, behaviors, and fears. Only then can we begin to embrace the fullness of our being. And so, we must ask, what does it really mean to be whole? Is it about fitting into a society that demands perfection? Or is it about accepting the entirety of who we are, flaws, contradictions, and all? In this exploration, we'll dive deeper into Jung's ideas and how they challenge the myth of being broken, offering a radically different way to view ourselves and our struggles. This is the beginning of a journey into the self, a journey that will not lead us to the illusion of perfection, but to the reality of wholeness. This section sets the stage for the exploration of Jungian psychology, framing the common experience of feeling broken as a profound misunderstanding of our inner selves. It raises the central question of the script: what does it mean to be whole? And how does the perception of brokenness shape our lives? The narrative invites the viewer to engage with their own inner conflicts, setting the tone for a deeper psychological and philosophical inquiry. The shadow is not something we often like to confront. In fact, it's a part of ourselves we would rather pretend doesn't exist. It's the part that we keep hidden, the aspects of our personality we refuse to acknowledge: weaknesses, fears, darker impulses, desires, and instincts. But as much as we try to ignore it, the shadow is always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, argued that this neglected part of our psyche holds the key to our personal growth and self-acceptance. In his view, the shadow is not something to be feared, but something to be understood and integrated. We all know what it feels like to want to appear perfect, to maintain a facade that projects strength, beauty, and confidence. Yet, the more we focus on this polished version of ourselves, the more we distance ourselves from the truth of who we really are. We repress the parts of us that we deem unacceptable, convinced that they are flaws we must hide in order to survive in a society that rewards only the perfect, the curated, the controlled. But in doing so, we neglect a vital part of our psychological makeup, the shadow. The shadow is not inherently evil. In fact, it can often be the source of our greatest strengths. It's the part of us that contains our deepest desires, our untapped potential, and our most profound fears. But when we deny it, when we refuse to acknowledge it, the shadow takes on a life of its own, manifesting in destructive ways. It shows up in our lives as the patterns we can't break, the reoccurring mistakes we can't seem to avoid, or the emotional reactions we don't understand. These unconscious forces drive much of our behavior, yet we rarely take the time to understand them. Jung's concept of the shadow speaks directly to the parts of ourselves we are most afraid to face. It is the dark side of the human experience, the rage we push down, the jealousy we deny, the insecurities we mask behind bravado. To face the shadow means to confront the very aspects of our psyche that we have spent a lifetime trying to bury. It means recognizing that the traits we reject in ourselves are not the result of being broken, but of being human. We all have shadows, and they are not the monsters lurking under the bed. They are the parts of us that have been misunderstood. Repression is a powerful force in our lives. When we choose to ignore our shadow, we are essentially sweeping our problems under the rug, convincing ourselves that they don't exist. But this repression comes with a price. When we deny the darker aspects of ourselves, they don't go away. Instead, they manifest in ways we don't expect. We may find ourselves reacting with disproportionate anger, indulging in self-destructive behaviors, or feeling overwhelmed by emotions we don't understand. This is the shadow trying to get our attention, trying to break through the walls we've built to keep it hidden. The consequences of repression extend far beyond our emotional well-being. When we fail to integrate our shadow, we become more vulnerable to manipulation, both by others and by our own unconscious drives. Without a clear understanding of our shadow, we are at the mercy of these forces. We might find ourselves falling into the traps of societal expectations, buying into false ideals of perfection, and allowing others to control our lives. The shadow can even manifest on a collective level, manifesting as the dark undercurrents of our society, the unacknowledged biases, the power structures that we refuse to confront. On a larger scale, when societies collectively repress their shadows, they become susceptible to destructive ideologies, toxic hierarchies, and systems of control that maintain a false sense of order. Jung's solution to this repression is not to simply cast out the shadow, but to integrate it. Integration is the process of accepting and understanding the unconscious forces that drive us. It's the realization that the shadow isn't something to be fixed or eliminated, but something to be embraced and understood. To integrate the shadow means to face our flaws and contradictions without judgment. It means recognizing the darker aspects of ourselves as part of our whole being, our full humanity. This process of integration requires courage, it requires honesty, and it requires a willingness to acknowledge that we are not perfect, that we are not always in control of our impulses, and that we are capable of both light and dark. But in doing so, we free ourselves from the chains of repression. We become more authentic, more self-aware, and more resilient. There is immense power in embracing our shadow. When we understand and accept the parts of ourselves that we once feared, we unlock a deeper sense of strength and inner peace. We no longer need to hide behind a mask of perfection, because we have come to terms with the full spectrum of our being. This is where true personal growth begins. The shadow, when integrated, is not just a source of personal transformation, it is a source of wisdom. By embracing the very aspects of ourselves we once rejected, we come to understand that our flaws, And weaknesses are not our enemies, but teachers. They reveal to us our deepest truths and offer the opportunity to transcend the limitations of our conditioned selves. Through this process, we can heal the wounds we have inflicted upon ourselves through years of self-denial and disconnection. But how do we begin this journey of integration? It starts with acknowledgement. We must confront the parts of ourselves we have been avoiding: the anger, the jealousy, the shame, and ask ourselves why they exist. We must learn to accept these feelings, to observe them without judgment, and to understand what they are telling us about our deeper selves. Only then can we begin the process of healing, of reclaiming the parts of ourselves we have lost along the way. This is where true wholeness lies. It's not in the perfection of the self, but in the acceptance of its contradictions. When we embrace the totality of who we are, flaws and all, we free ourselves from the chains of repression and step into a fuller, more authentic version of ourselves. Jung's theory of the shadow invites us to explore not just the darkness within us, but the potential for growth and transformation that exists in acknowledging it. When we stop running from our shadows, we stop running from ourselves. We stop living in the fear of being broken and start living in the strength of being whole, complex, multifaceted, and profoundly human. In every social interaction, whether we are aware of it or not, we wear a mask. This mask is not just a figurative shield to protect us. It is the carefully crafted version of ourselves that we present to the world, the persona, derived from the Latin word for mask. The persona is the image we project, the role we play to gain acceptance, approval, and approval from society. But what happens when this mask becomes more than just a tool for social survival? What happens when it becomes the only self we know? The persona serves a practical purpose. It allows us to function within the complex webs of social expectations, professional obligations, and cultural norms. It helps us navigate through life without completely exposing our raw, unrefined selves. In a world that demands certain standards of behavior, appearance, and success, the persona ensures that we meet these expectations. It shields us from judgment, protects us from rejection, and ultimately helps us belong. But over time, something subtle happens. We begin to identify with the persona itself, rather than the true self that lies behind it. The roots of the persona can be traced to early childhood. As we grow and socialize, we internalize the values and expectations of those around us, our families, peers, teachers, and the media. We learn what is acceptable and what is not, what gets us praise and what gets us punished. Slowly, we begin to shape our behavior to align with these external expectations, molding ourselves into the version that fits neatly into society's framework. At first, this may seem harmless, perhaps even necessary for survival. After all, without the persona, how would we navigate the complexities of social life? But over time, this protective mask can become all-consuming. The persona can become so ingrained in our identity that we no longer recognize it as just a mask. It feels real. It becomes our reality. We begin to think that the version of ourselves that others see is the only version that exists, and we lose touch with the essence of who we truly are. This is where the psychological cost of the persona becomes apparent. The more we invest in it, the more we distance ourselves from our authentic selves, the more we perform to gain approval, the less we understand what truly drives us, what truly brings us joy, and what we truly value. The gap between the persona and the true self begins to widen, and with it comes an unsettling feeling of disconnection. We may achieve outward success, garner admiration from others, and even gain a sense of security. But deep down, we feel empty, like an actor playing a role without truly knowing who they are behind the scenes. The tension between the persona and the true self is perhaps most evident in moments of crisis or inner turmoil. We may find ourselves stuck in a job or relationship that no longer serves us, yet we continue to maintain the same behaviors and attitudes we adopted long ago to fit into society's mold. We keep playing the role because it has become so familiar, so ingrained in our sense of identity. But with this continued performance comes an emotional toll. The more we live behind the mask, the more we suppress our real emotions, desires, and needs. The more we repress the true self, the more it fights to be heard. This inner conflict often manifests as anxiety, depression, or a general sense of unease. We may feel as if we are living someone else's life, or worse, that we are betraying ourselves by continuing to live inauthentically. The persona, originally meant to protect us, now holds us hostage. It becomes a prison that we can't escape from, a role that we can't quit playing. And the longer we wear the mask, the harder it becomes to remember who we are without it. There's a powerful paradox at play here. The persona is meant to help us connect with others, but it often does the opposite. As we wear this mask to gain approval and acceptance, we inadvertently create a barrier between ourselves and others. We may present an image of confidence, success, or happiness, but behind that facade, we feel isolated and misunderstood. The persona may allow us to be liked, but it doesn't necessarily allow us to be loved for who we truly are. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of superficial interactions, where we are valued not for our true selves but for the roles we play. The persona is also a breeding ground for insecurity. The more we identify with it, the more we fear losing it. We fear that if we were to drop the mask, if we were to show our true selves, others would reject us. This fear can become overwhelming, leading us to cling to the persona even more tightly. We find ourselves constantly performing, constantly trying to meet the expectations of others, never fully satisfied with our own identity. We begin to define ourselves by external validation rather than internal truth. Our self-worth becomes tied to how well we can maintain the mask, rather than how authentic we are underneath it. But it's not just an individual problem. The persona has societal implications too. As we all wear our masks, we contribute to a culture that prioritizes appearances over authenticity. Society rewards those who can perform the best, those who can fit neatly into predefined roles. We are bombarded with images of success, beauty, and happiness that are often nothing more than carefully curated personas. Social media, for example, is a perfect breeding ground for these false selves. People present only the highlights of their lives, portraying themselves as perfect, happy, and successful, while hiding the struggles and vulnerabilities that make them human. This constant comparison can exacerbate the feeling of disconnection, making us feel as though we are the only ones who are not living up to the ideal. So, what happens when we finally begin to question the persona we have built? The journey of self-awareness and authenticity requires us to confront the tension between the mask and the true self. It asks us to step back and ask, who am I really? The road to self-discovery is not easy. It requires vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to risk rejection by showing up as our real, imperfect selves. But the rewards are profound. When we drop the mask, we begin to experience the world in a more genuine way. We start to form deeper, more meaningful connections with others because we are no longer hiding behind a facade. We no longer need to perform for validation. We can finally let go of the fear of rejection and embrace the freedom that comes with living authentically. The persona, while useful for survival, is ultimately a distortion of who we truly are. It is a mask that hides our vulnerabilities, our imperfections, and our true desires. But when we let go of the need to conform, when we strip away the layers of false identity, we uncover the depth of who we are. We begin to realize that we are not the roles we play, but the essence that exists beneath them. The process of shedding the persona is the first step toward embracing our true selves. And in that embrace, we find the freedom to live authentically, to live fully. Inside each of us lies an unconscious force, a duality of power, which is often overlooked or misunderstood. These forces, the anima and animus, are the feminine and masculine aspects within each individual. For men, the anima represents the feminine spirit, the image of the woman within them. For women, the animus represents the masculine spirit, the image of the man within them. These are not biological traits or mere gender stereotypes. They are deeply ingrained archetypes that shape our identity, our relationships, and even our perceptions of gender itself. The concept of the anima and animus comes from the mind of Carl Jung, who believed that every individual harbors both masculine and feminine traits. These aspects of ourselves are not to be understood in a simplistic, binary sense of male or female, but rather as universal archetypes that influence the very structure of our psyches. Jung argued that to be truly whole, we must recognize, understand, and integrate these inner forces because they are not simply part of who we are. They shape the foundation of our identities. Consider, for a moment, the way society often prescribes roles to men and women. Men are encouraged to be strong, assertive, and rational qualities that are associated with the masculine. Women, on the other hand, are expected to be nurturing, empathetic, and emotional qualities tied to the feminine. These cultural roles reinforce the idea that masculinity and femininity exist in separate domains, creating a false dichotomy. But Jung's work suggests something more profound. Both masculine and feminine energies exist within each of us, regardless of our outward gender. The anima and animus are not just abstract philosophical concepts. They have tangible effects on our lives. They affect the way we see ourselves, the way we interact with others, and how we navigate the world. When we reject or fail to integrate these inner forces, we create a distorted view of ourselves, which can lead to deep psychological struggles. For men, rejecting the anima, the feminine energy within them, can lead to a repressive, disconnected way of being. They may suppress their emotions, dismiss vulnerability, and avoid relationships that require empathy. This repression creates a void in their psyche, leading to feelings of incompleteness, frustration, and an inability to connect with the opposite sex. For women, the animus, the masculine energy within them, can also be repressed or misunderstood. A woman who denies her animus may struggle with assertiveness or the ability to pursue her goals with determination. She may feel conflicted about her independence, torn between societal expectations to be nurturing and the internal drive to assert herself. Women who fail to integrate their animus might experience difficulty in standing their ground, establishing boundaries, and pursuing their ambitions. The resulting tension between the societal expectations of femininity and their internal masculine energy can lead to frustration, self-doubt, and confusion about their place in the world. The consequences of repressing the anima or animus extend far beyond personal identity. They seep into our relationships with others, shaping the way we interact with the opposite sex. When men reject the feminine aspects of themselves, they often create unhealthy relationships with women. They may objectify women or view them as distant, unknowable beings rather than seeing them as equal partners with their own complexities and depths. Men who neglect the anima may find it difficult to connect with women on a meaningful emotional level, leading to superficial relationships that lack true intimacy. Similarly, women who repress the masculine elements of themselves may experience frustration in their relationships with men. They may feel the pressure to conform to traditional gender roles and may struggle to assert their own needs, desires, and boundaries. In some cases, this repression can lead to self-sabotaging behaviors, as they suppress their ambitions or act out of self-doubt rather than confidence. Without the animus, a woman's sense of self can become fragmented, and her ability to engage with men as equals is severely limited. But perhaps the most profound consequence of rejecting these inner forces is the impact on self-image. The anima and animus are integral parts of our identity, and when we repress them, we lose touch with our true selves. We can become disconnected, fragmented, and emotionally stunted. The psyche, as Jung argued, is not an isolated entity but a dynamic system of interacting forces. When one of these forces, the masculine or the feminine, is neglected, it causes an imbalance that can lead to profound internal conflict. It is only through embracing the anima and animus that we can achieve psychological wholeness. Integrating these forces doesn't mean adopting gendered behaviors or adopting an artificial identity. It means acknowledging the complexity of our own nature and recognizing that masculinity and femininity are not opposites, but complementary forces. By integrating the anima, men can learn to embrace their emotions, connect with their intuitive side, and express vulnerability. Women, by embracing the animus, can develop confidence, assertiveness, and clarity of purpose. In this way, both men and women can become more complete, more whole, and more balanced. The process of integrating the anima and animus is not easy. It requires us to confront deeply ingrained beliefs about gender, identity, and societal expectations. It demands that we question the roles we have been taught to play and the images we have internalized. It challenges us to step beyond our comfort zones and explore the parts of ourselves that we have long ignored or suppressed. But the rewards of this integration are immense. As we embrace both our masculine and feminine energies, we not only become more authentic individuals, but also develop deeper, more meaningful connections with others. We learn to love ourselves fully and, in turn, to love others in a more complete and accepting way. The integration of the anima and animus is also a crucial step in healing the cultural divide between men and women in a world that often pits the sexes against each other. Understanding the inner feminine and masculine in each of us can help bridge that gap. When we are aware of the anima and animus, we begin to see the fullness of the opposite sex not as a mere reflection of societal roles, but as a dynamic, complex being. This deeper understanding fosters empathy, respect, and genuine connection between men and women. The anima and animus, as Jung taught us, are not just theoretical constructs. They are living forces within us, shaping our identities, our relationships, and our sense of self. They are the key to understanding who we truly are, not just as men and women, but as human beings, complete in our complexity. By embracing these inner forces, we begin the journey of self-discovery, a journey that leads us towards psychological wholeness and deeper connection with ourselves and with each other. At the heart of Carl Jung's psychological philosophy lies a concept so profound, yet so elusive, that it has the power to redefine the very nature of personal growth and self-understanding. This concept is known as individuation, the process through which an individual integrates the unconscious parts of the self into conscious awareness. It is the journey from fragmentation to wholeness, a process that challenges the false narrative of being broken and invites us to transcend our superficial identities, to discover the truth of who we really are. In its simplest form, individuation is the process of becoming your true self. It is the journey of integrating all aspects of the unconscious, the hidden, often repressed parts of our psyche into conscious awareness. It is about acknowledging that our identity is not just what we show the world, but a complex amalgamation of conscious thoughts, repressed desires, inherited fears, and forgotten memories. Only by bringing these hidden elements into the light can we hope to heal the internal divisions that make us feel fragmented, incomplete, or disconnected. Jung believed that, in order to live an authentic and meaningful life, we must confront the self, not just the part we present to the world, but the totality of who we are, our contradictions, our complexities, and our deepest fears. Individuation is the bridge that allows us to reconcile these often opposing forces within ourselves, transforming our vulnerabilities and weaknesses into sources of strength. What individuation is, the journey to holiness. Individuity is more than just a psychological process, it's a metaphysical transformation. It is about finding the courage to confront the parts of ourselves that we might prefer to ignore or suppress. These parts could be repressed memories, unacknowledged desires, or shadowy aspects of our personality. As we journey through life, these elements remain locked away in the unconscious, sometimes creating dissonance or anxiety when they resurface. It is through the process of individuation that we begin to integrate these fragments of the self into a cohesive whole, allowing us to transcend the artificial barriers we've constructed to define ourselves. At its core, individuation involves stepping away from the false self we present to the world, the mask we wear to fit societal expectations, and embracing the entirety of our being. The false self is often shaped by our upbringing, our cultural conditioning, and our desire to be accepted. But beneath this mask lies the authentic self, the individual we are meant to be, unshackled from the limitations imposed by the outside world. However, this journey is not easy. It requires a radical confrontation with the unconscious. It demands that we face aspects of our personality that we have long avoided or denied, and it involves a profound and often painful process of self-examination. But as we do this, we begin to experience a sense of wholeness, as if the fragmented pieces of our identity have finally come together. This is the transformative power Of individuation, the capacity to become whole. The stages of individuation is not a linear process, but a dynamic and ongoing journey that unfolds in stages. These stages are not rigid steps, but rather evolving phases in which we come to understand ourselves at a deeper level. Each stage presents its own unique challenges and insights, leading us toward a fuller realization of who we are. The encounter with the shadow. The first stage of individuation often begins with a confrontation with the shadow, those aspects of our personality that have been suppressed, denied, or overlooked. These are the parts of ourselves that we find unacceptable or uncomfortable, whether they be our flaws, our darker impulses, or the traits we have been conditioned to see as undesirable. Jung argued that the shadow is not inherently negative. It is simply the unconscious counterpart to the persona we present to the world. Yet, because these aspects are not acknowledged, they can take on a life of their own, often manifesting in our dreams, projections, or irrational behaviors. The task in this stage is to acknowledge the shadow, to bring these unconscious elements into the light of consciousness. This process is not about rejecting the shadow, but about accepting it as part of the self. By recognizing our flaws, fears, and repressed desires, we stop allowing them to control us from the shadows. This is where the first step toward true psychological growth occurs. When we begin to embrace the full spectrum of who we are, both the light and the dark. The encounter with the animusence we have faced the shadow. The next stage of individuation involves confronting the anima in men or animus in women, the inner feminine or masculine aspect of the self. As discussed earlier, the anima and animus represent the opposite gender archetypes within us. For men, the anima is the embodiment of the feminine, while for women, the animus represents the masculine. These inner forces play a crucial role in our relationships with the opposite sex and, when repressed, can lead to distorted views of both ourselves and others. Engaging with the anima or animus involves recognizing and integrating these gendered archetypes, moving beyond societal conditioning of what it means to be masculine or feminine. For men, this means acknowledging their emotional, intuitive, and nurturing capacities, while for women, it involves embracing their assertiveness, rationality, and independence. The anima and animus are not just about gender, they are archetypes that represent our wholeness and the balance between the rational and emotional, the logical and intuitive. Integrating these forces leads to a deeper understanding of oneself and fosters more harmonious relationships. The integration of the self. Final stage of individuation is the integration of the self, the realization of the totality of the psyche. This is the culmination of the journey, where all the fragmented parts of the self, our conscious identity, our unconscious desires, our shadow, and our animus come together in a harmonious union. At this point, the individual has achieved a state of psychological wholeness. The external world no longer dictates their sense of identity. Instead, they are guided by an inner truth, a deeper alignment with their true self. But achieving this integration is not the end, it is a continuous process. As we move through life, we encounter new challenges, new experiences, and new aspects of our psyche that require us to continue evolving. The process of individuation is ongoing, but it is also deeply fulfilling. It is the process of becoming authentic, of living with integrity and purpose, and of cultivating a life that reflects our deepest truths. Real-life examples of individuation is not just an abstract concept. It is something that can be seen in the lives of individuals who have faced the journey of self-discovery. Take, for instance, the life of Carl Jung himself. Throughout his life, Jung engaged deeply with his own unconscious, facing the shadow, confronting his inner anima, and struggling with the conflicts within his psyche. His own journey of individuation led to his profound contributions to psychology and his understanding of the human soul. Jung's work is an embodiment of the individuation process, an ongoing exploration of the unconscious mind. Another striking example is Vincent van Gogh, whose struggle with mental illness and societal rejection forced him to confront his own inner turmoil. His art was a direct reflection of his inner journey, his quest to understand the unconscious forces driving him, his fear, his loneliness, and his genius. Van Gogh's work exemplifies the transformative power of facing the unconscious. His pain became the catalyst for his unique artistic expression. Individuation can also be seen in the lives of many who have undergone deep personal transformation. Nelson Mandela, for example, spent years imprisoned in solitude, where he faced the profound contradictions within himself, ultimately emerging as a leader who embodied both compassion and strength. His journey of personal growth and reconciliation mirrors the individuation process on a societal level. Conclusion individuality is the process through which we step beyond the false narratives of our lives and embrace the totality of who we are. It is about confronting the unconscious, acknowledging the parts of ourselves we have long ignored, and integrating these aspects into a harmonious whole. The journey is long, difficult, and often painful, but it is the only path to true self-understanding. As we continue on this path, we discover not just who we are, but who we are meant to be. Have you ever experienced a sense of déjà vu? A feeling that you've lived through something before even though it's entirely new? Or perhaps you've been moved by a story, an image, or a symbol that seemed to speak to you on a deeper, almost instinctual level. These moments are not merely coincidental or personal quirks of perception. They may point to something far deeper, something shared by all of humanity. Carl Jung called this universal well of experiences, memories, and archetypes the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a concept that challenges one of our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of selfhood, that we are solitary, isolated beings with unique, personal experiences. Jung's theory suggests that beneath our individual consciousnesses lies a vast, shared psychological reservoir, one that connects every human being across time and space. Far from being isolated in our struggles or triumphs, we are all bound together by these shared, inherited experiences. Jung argued that the collective unconscious is not just a theoretical construct, it is a tangible, vital aspect of the human experience. It's the deep layer of the psyche that we all share, containing a vast array of symbols, themes, and archetypes that resonate deeply with every person, regardless of culture, geography, or history. These archetypes, figures like the hero, the shadow, the anima and animus, and others, are universal patterns that shape not only our individual lives, but also our societies, cultures, and even the course of history. This is a radical idea. What if the feeling of being broken is not the result of a personal failure, but instead a reflection of a larger, universal process? What if the struggles we face, the fears and desires we feel, are not just our own, but the echoes of centuries of shared human experience? To understand the collective unconscious is to begin to see ourselves not as isolated, but as part of a larger, interconnected web of humanity, one that spans generations, cultures, and even millennia. The nature of the collective unconscious. At the heart of the collective unconscious is the idea that there is a layer of the psyche that transcends the individual. Unlike the personal unconscious, which contains repressed memories and forgotten experiences unique to each person, the collective unconscious is universal. It contains the shared psychological inheritance of the human race. These are the deeper patterns and symbols that exist in all human minds, waiting to emerge when the right conditions arise. But the collective unconscious is not a mere collection of random thoughts or experiences. Jung believed that it was structured and organized around archetypes, fundamental, recurring patterns of thought and behavior that have been shaped by humanity's long history. These archetypes are not learned, they are inherited, passed down through generations, and embedded in the very fabric of the human psyche. For example, the hero archetype is one of the most universally recognized symbols in human culture. It can be seen in myths, legends, and religions throughout history. From the Greek hero Heracles to modern-day figures like Superman, the hero is a symbol of courage, transformation, and the battle against adversity. We all recognize the hero, not because we have learned about him through our individual experiences, but because this archetype is embedded in our collective consciousness. Similarly, the shadow represents the dark, repressed aspects of the self, those traits we reject or deny, but which nevertheless influence our behavior. The shadow exists in every person, and it is often projected onto others in times of conflict or fear. This archetype is not a personal creation, but a collective one, deeply ingrained in the human psyche. Other examples of archetypes include the wise old man, the mother, the trickster, and the anima, animus. Each of these archetypes plays a profound role in shaping our thoughts, behaviors, and perceptions. They are not just theoretical concepts, they are living patterns that influence us, often in ways we cannot consciously recognize. Archetypes and their influence on our behavior and culture. Archetypes shape not only our individual behavior, but also the structure of society and culture. Think about the stories, myths, and religious narratives that have persisted across cultures and centuries. These narratives often feature archetypal figures: the hero who goes on a transformative journey, the mentor who provides guidance, the villain who represents evil, and the sacrificial figure who symbolizes selflessness and redemption. These stories aren't just entertaining, they serve a psychological function. They allow us to process our collective experiences and internal conflicts, providing a symbolic language through which we can understand ourselves and the world around us. This is why certain themes recur in literature, film, and folklore. Why the hero's journey resonates with us so deeply, or why the tragic fall of the hero brings us sorrow. These stories tap into deep, unconscious patterns within us, allowing us to work through emotions and ideas that are too complex for the conscious mind to fully comprehend. In modern society, these archetypes continue to influence the way we view the world. Politicians, business leaders, and celebrities often embody certain archetypal figures that we project onto them. A political leader, for instance, might be seen as a hero, standing against adversity to defend the people. Similarly, corporate moguls can be viewed as tricksters, figures who disrupt the status quo, but often for their own gain. These archetypes play an important role in shaping how we respond to cultural figures and political movements, often more so than the actual individuals themselves. The media is another powerful force through which these archetypes are transmitted and reinforced. Hollywood films, books, and advertisements are rife with archetypal imagery, all designed to resonate with the deepest parts of our psyche. The James Bond films, for example, portray the hero archetype, while the Star Wars saga explores themes of the shadow and the hero's journey. Even advertising campaigns often rely on archetypes to sell products, using the mother archetype to promote nurturing and care, or the rebel archetype to appeal to a desire for freedom and independence. These patterns are not just coincidental, they are part of the collective psychological inheritance of humanity. We respond to them because they resonate with something deep within us, something we may not always fully understand, but which shapes our behavior, decisions, and desires. How understanding the collective unconscious can alleviate the feeling of being broken in the midst of life's trials. It's easy to feel isolated, disconnected, and perhaps even broken. We may look at our struggles, whether they are personal, emotional, or existential, and believe that we are alone in our suffering. But what if this sense of isolation is an illusion? What if our struggles are not unique to us, but part of a universal human experience? By understanding the collective unconscious, we begin to see that we are not as separate from others as we might think. The emotions, fears, and desires we experience are not merely personal. They are shared by every human being who has ever lived. We are not alone in our pain, nor are we alone in our pursuit of meaning, purpose, or fulfillment. These are the common threads that bind us together, and they have been woven into the very fabric of human existence for millennia. This realization can be profoundly liberating. If we recognize that our struggles are part of a larger, collective journey, we can begin to shed the illusion of being broken. We are not isolated individuals dealing with an insurmountable burden. We are part of a much larger story, one that stretches across generations and cultures, a story in which each of us plays a vital role. Understanding the collective unconscious also helps us see the bigger picture of our lives. The archetypes that influence us are not just remnants of ancient history. They are still very much alive today, shaping our relationships, our choices, and our interactions with the world. This recognition helps us move beyond the surface level struggles of daily life and connect with the deeper, more universal patterns that guide our existence. Conclusion: the collective unconscious is not just a theory, it is a powerful tool. for understanding the deeper currents of human experience. It challenges us to move beyond the illusion of isolation and recognize that our personal struggles are part of a larger, shared human journey. By understanding the archetypes that shape our lives and cultures, we can begin to embrace the universal aspects of the self, leading to a deeper sense of connection, purpose, and understanding. We are not broken. We are part of something far greater than ourselves, part of a vast, interconnected web of humanity. And once we understand this, we can begin to heal, not just as individuals, but as a collective whole. In the search for meaning, we often find ourselves reaching for an idealized version of the self, an image of wholeness that is flawless, perfect, and unbroken. This ideal is everywhere we look, in the polished images of success paraded by social media, in the narratives of achievement we consume through film and literature, in the societal pressures that demand we fit a particular mold. To be whole, we are told, is to be complete, unimpeachable, free from the imperfections and messiness of life. But what if this view of wholeness is not only unattainable, but also fundamentally wrong? The truth is, wholeness is not about perfection, it's about acceptance. It is the courage to embrace all parts of the self, even those that seem broken, flawed, or contradictory. Carl Jung, one of the great minds of modern psychology, understood this deeply. He taught that true wholeness is not a state of flawlessness, but an integration of every part of our being, the light and the dark, the beautiful and the ugly, the confident and the vulnerable. Our society often tells us that to be whole, we must be complete, without blemish or flaw. But this ideal leaves little room for the truth of the human experience. We all carry contradictions, struggles, and imperfections. To strive for perfection is to ignore the very essence of what it means to be human. It's to deny the truth that every person is an intricate blend of conflicting desires, fears, strengths, and weaknesses. Wholeness, then, is not about erasing these contradictions, but about embracing them. Wholeness as acceptance, not perfection. Path to wholeness is not a linear journey. It does not require that we fix ourselves, nor that we meet some external standard of beauty, success, or happiness. Instead, it demands that we accept our own complexity. Every part of ourselves, the parts we love and the parts we fear, must be integrated into a cohesive whole. In Jungian psychology, this process is called individuation. It's the journey of becoming the person you truly are by integrating the unconscious with the conscious mind. This doesn't mean that you must eliminate your flaws, but that you must acknowledge and accept them. Your darkness, your fears, and your weaknesses are not things to be ashamed of. They are essential parts of your unique identity. When we think about the human experience, we often divide ourselves into neat categories: good or bad, strong or weak, successful or failed. But in truth, these distinctions are much more fluid and dynamic than we are led to believe. We can be deeply compassionate, yet hold grudges. We can be strong in some areas of our lives while struggling in others. We can feel joy and sorrow in tandem, as though both are equally valid parts of our emotional spectrum. The misconception that wholeness equals perfection has led many to live in constant self-rejection, always feeling like they must hide parts of themselves, even from their own eyes. The truth is, these so-called flaws are not weaknesses. They are human. They are what make us relatable, what connect us to others. If we are constantly striving to be flawless, we miss out on the richness of human experience and the depth of connection we can have with ourselves and others. Consider the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is often seen as weakness in a world that worships strength and stoicism. We've all been taught to hide our vulnerability, to mask our fears and insecurities behind the armor of perfection. Yet, vulnerability is not a flaw. It is the path to true strength. It is in our vulnerability that we find the courage to be authentic, to share ourselves fully with others, and to embrace the complexities of our being. Real strength comes not from perfection, but from the courage to be fully ourselves, flaws and all. The relationship between vulnerability and strength, idea that strength and vulnerability are opposites, is one of the greatest myths perpetuated by modern culture. We are taught that to be strong is to be unshakable, impenetrable, and invulnerable. But this idea of strength is a delusion, one that pushes us to hide our emotions, suppress our weaknesses, and strive for a version of ourselves that is inhumanly perfect. But when we strip away the layers of pretension and look deeper, we see that the most resilient people, the ones who endure life's hardships with grace, are often those who have embraced their vulnerability. These are the people who do not hide from their pain, but who face it head-on, knowing that true strength is forged in the fire of suffering. Vulnerability, in this sense, becomes a source of power. It is through embracing our wounds that we begin to heal, and in healing, we become whole. The concept of vulnerability as strength is beautifully illustrated in many of the world's greatest stories. Think of the tragic yet inspiring character of Oedipus, who, despite his tragic flaws, sought the truth and faced his own darkness. Or Frida Kahlo, whose physical and emotional pain became the wellspring of her art and the source of her unflinching honesty. These figures didn't hide their flaws, they made them an integral part of their journey toward wholeness. They embodied the idea that it is not our perfection, but our acceptance of ourselves' imperfections and all that makes us truly strong. Moreover, embracing our vulnerability opens the door to deeper connections with others. In a world where so many of us are driven by the need to appear flawless, true connection can feel elusive. But when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same. We create the space for authentic relationships, not ones built on pretense and false perfection, but on mutual understanding, shared experiences, and acceptance. It's only through the acceptance of our vulnerability that we begin to see that wholeness is not a state of being perfect, but of being complete with all our complexity, the light and the dark, the strength and the vulnerability, the successes and the failures. Wholeness is not a fixed goal to be achieved, but a fluid, ongoing process of embracing who we truly are. The freedom that comes from embracing the full spectrum of human experience. When we allow ourselves to accept all aspects of our being, something profound happens. We free ourselves from the chains of self-rejection and societal expectation. We stop living in pursuit of an unattainable ideal, and instead, we begin to live authentically, to be fully alive to the richness of our human experience. This freedom is not about disregarding societal norms or rejecting all forms of self-improvement. It's about letting go of the unrealistic pressure to conform to a single, narrow vision of who we should be. It's about realizing that wholeness does not mean perfection, it means embracing the fullness of who we are as we are. Consider how this freedom can transform your life. When you stop chasing perfection, you stop comparing yourself to others. You stop feeling inadequate in the face of unrealistic standards. Instead, you focus on the journey of becoming more attuned to your own truths, to the complexity and beauty of your contradictions. You begin to accept that life's struggles, challenges, and imperfections are not the enemy, but part of the rich tapestry that makes us whole. In fact, it is often through struggle that we come to understand the depth of our own being. Without the shadows, the light cannot be fully appreciated. Without the pain, the joy cannot be fully savored. Wholeness, then, is a way of living that transcends the need for control, certainty, and perfection. It is about being fully human, embracing every aspect of ourselves, and in doing so, embracing the world around us with compassion, understanding, and acceptance. Conclusion: wellness, as Jung teaches us, is not about being flawless or perfect. It is about acceptance, accepting the complexity of the self, the contradictions within us, and the full spectrum of human experience. When we let go of the unrealistic pursuit of perfection, we open ourselves to the freedom that comes from living authentically. The journey toward wholeness is not a quest for an idealized version of ourselves, but a willingness to embrace all that we are, in all our messiness, imperfection, and beauty. This is where true strength lies, not in perfection, but in the courage to be whole. The idea that you are broken is one of the most pervasive and dangerous myths in modern life. It's a narrative we've been told, a story that's been etched into our collective consciousness. We feel it in our moments of failure, in the shadows of our doubt, and in the stillness of our isolation. We are led to believe that something is inherently wrong with us, an idea that undermines our sense of worth and keeps us trapped in a cycle of self-rejection. But what if the truth is that you are not broken? What if the feeling of fragmentation, the sense of being lost or incomplete, is simply a misunderstanding of the deeper layers of your psyche? What if you're not broken at all, but simply misunderstood? Jungian psychology invites us to explore this possibility. It offers a radical departure from the conventional wisdom that something needs to be fixed or healed. Instead, it suggests that the human experience is one of constant transformation, a process of integration, understanding, and acceptance. The parts of you that feel fractured or scattered are not signs of something wrong, but signals of the complexity and depth of your inner world. You are not a puzzle to be solved, but a work in progress, constantly evolving and growing. The process of self-awareness, as Jung would argue, is not about becoming perfect or whole in the conventional sense. It's about embracing the full spectrum of who you are, the light and the shadow, the known and the unknown. It's about understanding that the fragmented parts of your psyche are not weaknesses, but clues to a deeper truth about who you truly are. Your struggles, your pain, your contradictions, they are not signs of brokenness. They are expressions of a human experience that is intricate, multifaceted, and uniquely yours. Embracing these contradictions, instead of rejecting them, is where transformation begins. As you reflect on your own psychological journey, ask yourself, what parts of yourself have you hidden or rejected? What aspects of your psyche have you dismissed as flawed or unworthy? The journey towards self-acceptance begins with a simple yet profound shift in perspective. Instead of seeing yourself as broken, see yourself as misunderstood, and in that misunderstanding, there lies the potential for profound change. This journey is not about achieving perfection or conforming to societal standards. It's about accepting your own complexity and acknowledging that the path towards self-awareness is often messy, uncomfortable, and uncertain. But it is also the path toward authenticity and empowerment. It is through this understanding that you will find the courage to live more fully, more deeply, and more genuinely. As we come to the end of this exploration, remember, you are not broken. You are simply a person on a path of transformation, discovering the depth and richness of your own being, and in that journey, you are not alone. We are all misunderstood at times, lost in the shadows of our unconscious, struggling to make sense of our own complexity. But as Jung taught us, it is through this process of coming to understand the self, through the integration of the conscious and unconscious, the light and the dark, that we can step into a more authentic and empowered version of who we truly are. So, let go of the narrative that you are broken. Let go of the idea that you need to be fixed. Instead, embrace the fact that you are on a path of becoming, a journey toward the fullest expression of your true self in all its beautiful complexity. And in doing so, you will find that the very parts of you that once seemed fragmented are actually the keys to your transformation. You are not broken. You are misunderstood, and that misunderstanding is the doorway to your true self.